Water, a fortune fed by mountains and Himalayas, a wealth in plenty in the valleys of Bhutan. The roar just gets bigger by the summer. The wet season fills the gashes of the dry earth, the thirst-ridden soil quench the long year dehydration. But down by the plains and up in the valleys, farmers carry worried faces. In the far east, it is time for the farmers to transplant their paddy. The sky remained unforgiving, the irrigation channel thirstier than ever. They seek divine intervention. Hopes are high that it will rain the next day, but sadly, it did not. Likewise, in another part of the country, with very limited water for irrigation, their story is no different.
My paddy fields were dry land before, but after it was converted to wetland more than a decade ago, I've been buying water from the upper village. My paddy fields are above the irrigation channel and there are no other sources nearby.
The smaller streams in the locality have completely dried up. The remaining water sources are also becoming smaller by the day. We are hoping this water source would not dry too soon. The discharge at the source is quite big for now.
With water sources drying up, we are worried. The current source is very small, and while animals are also dependent on the water, it gets even smaller. Irrigation water is not fit for consumption, so if the source dries up, we don't know where to look for a different source.
If this drinking water source dries up, the only alternative is to draw water from a source which is nearby the upper village. It is quite far. Otherwise, there is no source nearby. The one by the end of the village will be quite a challenge to pump here.
With 5 major river basins, more than 550 water sources, and nearly 200 watersheds across the country, Bhutan is known for its abundant water resources. It is through the water that the country generates maximum revenue from the sale of electricity. But the majority of paddy cultivating farmers across the country are dependent on perennial streams, rainfall, and natural watersheds to cultivate paddy. So what could be the story behind the unforgiving facts?
Experts say that plenty and scarcity at the same time, because our villages, our settlements is such that they are located on the hilltops, the slopey areas like steep slopes, which are relatively higher than the river banks. And this river water is not much of useful to the farms because they are, in terms of the gravity, they are too low to actually provide, kind of supply to the farmers.
Being in a fragile mountain ecosystem, there are so many reasons for deficiency in irrigation water. As said earlier, one is the difficulty in, firstly, difficulty in setting up the infrastructure itself, and secondly, the operation and maintenance costs. Thirdly, for the fact that most of our bigger water bodies, that's the rivers, are all flowing in the low valleys, and our terraced paddy fields are at much higher altitudes.
With almost 100,000 cubic meter per capita water available to the Bhutanese, it's ironic and sad that we complain of water shortage, both for drinking as well as for agriculture. Now, as we analyze this issue, what comes to our mind and what we found or what we find around is the lack of or poor implementation of water activities. We do also have poor, in a way, governance and management of water.
Researchers mention that more than 60% of the country's population are directly engaged in agriculture. And this means the majority of the people are affected by this deficiency. This also directly translates to the low production of food in the country, especially water-dependent crops.
Rice production in Bhutan, the rice fields themselves, according to the latest data, we just have about 30,000 acres area, and from that we produce about 50,000 tons of paddy. When we mill that, only we get 65% of that. That comes to about 33,000 metric tons of milled rice. Now, annually our requirement is around 115,000 tons, metric tons. So we import so much. We import, the latest data we have is about 84,000 metric tons of rice. We produce just about 33,000 tons milled rice, but we import. So we are so import dependent.
For Bhutan, agriculture is the backbone of the country's economy. And giving equal importance to the development of agriculture, the central government invests huge resources for agricultural infrastructure. Among them, the Water Flagship program has been made a priority recently.
From the government side right now, there is a specific program called Water Flagship program. So where in water, drinking water and irrigation is given as a top priority. Through this Water Flagship program, government's effort is to provide equitable access to drinking water and irrigation, and it's a big investment. And in fact, our His Majesty the People's King has deployed Desung for developing irrigation water across the country and trying to make available to the people. I think it will change in a big way.
Given the topographical difficulties of the country, drawing water into the paddy fields has always remained a challenge. Even amid such difficulties, Bhutan has managed to construct over 800 irrigation water schemes. And more than that, retaining paddy fields has become even more difficult.
We actually have done a thorough review of starting in 1970s till about 2016. The area used to be very large in the past. So we are losing rice fields all the time. So our area is really decreasing. Past records show that we had about 30,000 hectares, which will be about 80,000 acres. Now we just have, I said, annually we cultivate over 30,000 acres.
Some of the irrigation channels have ended into total wastage. And the relevant stakeholders denunciate this to multifaceted accounts.
The operation and maintenance cost on a fragile mountain slope is always expensive. So there can be chances that some irrigation channels are washed away in between, and it's difficult. It has been difficult to find supplementary budgets to actually reconstruct those. In some places, the slats would be so severe that there will be no scope of reconstructing the channel. In some cases, with flash floods, the tapping point itself, the whole area gets washed away. So, rebuilding of the intake dam or intake channel will be quite difficult. So this could lead to the unuse of the irrigation channels.
Look at the irrigation schemes that we started in Bhutan. probably we are 50, 60 years old now. Anybody would think that, okay, probably somebody might have data. How did they actually monitor, and then how did they maintain that those structures? And then I think one of the things I always look at is baseline data. Do we have baseline data? Did we think about how did we monitor? And did we also think about what went wrong? I think our critical thinking should be to look at what did we do wrong? Where did we go wrong?
Yes, there are certain cases where concretizing and then, just the other where it is not concretized is, slips away, erosion, and even that, slides, and then you have a real problem of connecting water, bringing water. That has been an issue. But now, some of my irrigation colleagues tell me that concrete used to be in the past. Now they are more relying on pipes and other materials that could be more easily done, and perhaps cheaper to do that also.
Water resources in the country have been under the constant scrutiny of unpredictable climate change, melting of glaciers, increasing population and urbanization, and lack of multi-sectoral coordination, among others. Besides, experts believe poor integrated watershed management is a major setback.
Our infrastructure is not able to keep up with the need of the communities because of the increasing population. So there is, I think, water shortages because of those reasons also. Because maybe in the past, in ancient times when there was a small community with less population, I think a small pond or a stream was enough for the people. But now with increasing population and also in change of our habits, our lifestyle changes, I think water consumption is increasing.
I think its watershed management is moving in the right direction. They have come up with and implemented several watershed management plans. The case of Limitichu Watershed Management Plan, Wong Watershed Management Plant, Gamri Water Management Plant, and recently they have also come up with Buli Watershed Management Plan. I think they are going slow, going in the right direction. And one of the things perhaps slowing them down could be the lack of capacity, and then also the push to implement those plans.
Developmental activities such as the construction of roads and other infrastructure have reportedly damaged lots of water catchment areas.
Lots of developments are taking place in forest which act as the water sponge or water sink or water recharge areas. They are being degraded, they are being cut down. Trees are being cut down, especially the natural forest, the primary forest that existed before. We are losing them because of the land use change. They are being converted to agriculture or for other use.
We have lost many of the areas, rice fields. Some abandoned, some turned into forest. That was in the earlier days. Now we build our towns, our cities, Kuru, Bazo, Intimpu, Vavisa, all these examples.
And despite several policies and regulations in place, such concerns have been concurrent at the grassroots level. If such issues are any indication of failures, then it calls for stringent implementation of the laws.
We are lucky in the sense that we have so many projects, donors supporting us. So donor fund has not been a problem, but perhaps synergizing, coordinating these different projects with the ministry, with the Jongkaks, that I think smoothing definitely can be improved, coordination. And in the past, I think there was hardly any funds allocated for irrigation development, especially. But now there is. There's so many players, stakeholders on the donor side and also on the other side, that sometimes I think it becomes difficult. And that's the same case with marketing. So many problems. Farmers produce a little bit there and they're not able to sell that.
We have a lot of policies, rules and regulations, I'm of the opinion that maybe we don't need any more policies to look at the water resources, how to manage, but monitoring, implementation, probably, do we have that data? How did we implement? And then what did we do? And then what needs to be done? I think we lack this baseline data. So in terms of making decision, we need that strong database to look at what have we done, and then did we do enough? Is there any other options that actually we can look at, we can actually do better?
We have a visionary policy and the laws. So I think we are doing very well, except that because we are living in a eastern Himalayan ecosystem and in a mountainous area which is very fragile. So the global warming, the climate change is affecting us, not is of our making, but we have been locally doing very well.
Although everyone can play their role in contributing to the global problem, interventions from the lead agencies and stakeholders in the country will make a huge difference in the way it affects the grassroots level.
Yes, while NEC is the lead agency when it comes to policy matters, framing policies, and also for negotiations with the international partners. The most impacted sector of the climate change is definitely agriculture. So that way, for the Minister of Agriculture, our main focus will be to look at opportunities, how to adapt ourselves to the climate change impacts.
Earlier also we already had identified some water sources that are drying up. So there we are implementing interventions like trenches, where we can trap the rainfall and then let it infiltrate. So we have done the recharge mapping and then try to see whether we can revive that site.
It has become evident that water sources are drying up. A country with relatively low gross domestic product and still developing, agriculture will continue to be an important part of the people's livelihood. But given the trend that has already set in, where are we headed in terms of food production and self-sufficiency remains a big question.
Now, food self-sufficiency, when the ministry's policy or goal or the mandate is food self-sufficiency, that does not mean that we have to have 100% rice self-sufficiency. We can be food self-sufficient with production of other good cereals, having good nutritional value cereals, and then of course vegetables. And so ministry with the local government and of course the farmers who are actually working in the field are trying our best to go self-sufficient with vegetables, with other cereals.
When it comes to food security, we need to think of a basket of food crops. Rice is not only the crop, of course it's most preferred, and given the choice, I think most of us would like to eat rice, but nutritionally that's not the best. With all this, I think education and awareness, it will come. But in Bhutan, more than rice, we grow maize, kharang, for example. Why can't we? It's a better, nutritionally better food. So maize, wheat, buckwheat, barley, millet, quinoa, nutritionally very dense, good crop now we have introduced into the country, quinoa. So we have these 8 major food crops. But why are we depending so much only on rice? So what you need to do is, so in the country now we produce about 100,000 tons of the cereals altogether. And I said earlier, rice alone we need about 115. So we are closer to self-sufficiency if we consider all the food crops, not rice alone.
Rising temperature and change in the weather patterns have become a global issue. And although Bhutan has no contribution to this global problem, we will remain affected in one way or the other. But knowing this is going to stay, are we doing enough for embracing larger impacts?
What the ministry is looking at is to explore the closest water resources and also other technologies that we may not need to lay long distance irrigation canals. We are exploring at possibilities of pumping river waters for the low-lying paddy fields, and especially in the south, we are also looking at the options of boreholes. And the other thing is that we also will be looking at rainwater harvesting technologies.
So, with carbon dioxide concentration, nutritious component of the food actually decreases. So, in terms of that one, farmers would not be getting. We will not be getting the good food because we depend on the farmers for food. And then, then what happens is climate change, and then water to food security, and food security to health. It's it's a chain of events actually.
In the initial stage, people will have to be trained when you talk climate smart agriculture, and many of these are not very different. Like it's just slight tweaking of many of the practices that we have been already doing. There are many host of practices in climate smart agriculture. So what we can do is select those practices that would actually be implemented with very little hiccups, but with good success rate.
So one thing is we need to really work on the information generation across the country, mapping of spring water drying up across the country, and then trying to find a solution to that one. That is one. Another thing is we are working on how to improve the irrigation system using the high efficient irrigation system.
Hybrid technology, we have been using that technology in vegetable production. In cereals, rice, we have tried hybrid technology, but hybrid technology requires optimization of the management practices. The hybrid seed itself is not going to give us more yield. It has to be packaged. You have to provide all the nutrients in water and everything else, the management, timely weeding, timely irrigation, all of that. But these are not the ultimate answer. We need to use all of these technologies in such a way that we benefit from it.
Amid such adversities, coupled with uncertainties, what we plan and implement will determine what we consume. As much as these issues affect farmers, it will remain a distress to every individual. And therefore, to fight this adversity, to act as one and deliver the best become our common goal.